Hello and welcome back again to Louisville Cube League coverage. There's no new draft video today. Instead, we're going to be doing something a little bit different and bring you a bit of an event recap. 9 of us rode up to Madison, Wisconsin for CubeCon this year, and we were able to wrangle 5 of us to sit down and have a quick talk about our experience during the event. Stuff like which cubes we liked, our favorite decks, any cool plays that we were a part of or saw, or just any other thoughts on the event as a whole. Before we get started, I just wanted to point out that anytime you do see a QR code on the screen, it will be a link to the cube that we're currently discussing, as well as all of those links being in the description of the video below. With all that being said, I don't really have anything else to delay us getting into the actual discussion, so let's join the rest of the crew and hop right in.
Hello, we're here to talk about the Louisville Cube group who went to CubeCon. We had about 9 of us go. We have 5 of us to share our opinions. Right now in the call, we have me, Joey.
Me, Bryan.
And I'm Prose. So we're going to start out talking to Bryan about kind of his experience. Bryan was a first timer with us. Of the 9 of us, I think there were only 4 of us who had been before. Thanks for joining us, Bryan. I guess we just jump right into it. So what would you say was your favorite cube that you drafted at CubeCon?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My favorite cube was the control cube. It was really cool. I liked a lot of basically the core concept is it's like a base blue cube that features a lot of different control archetypes. And the deck that I ended up drafting was a Grixis control deck that just had like a lot of really cool stuff going on. There were a lot of cards that were like not cards that you would generally take super highly in cube, but in control cube kind of are like nuts crazy. Like Reb was in my deck, and it's like a house. It was insane, except
Yeah,
for I played against somebody who played Jund lands, and it was really bad again in that matchup, obviously.
sure,
But
sure.
but besides that, it was just like all your little like small little ways to generate card advantage because card advantage mattered like a lot. It was just like a really well designed cube. I liked it a lot.
You mentioned Reb specifically. Were there any other standouts? Taking a look at your pool, see a lot of nice ones. Just curious what maybe overperformed.
Um, the card days ended up being really good because it's just like a lot of I mean free spells in general are really good. Like I don't think I had Force of Will, but like the person that had Force of Will, it was like super good for them. I had Grief in my deck. Like just being able to do a thing that is kind of assertive and then also back that up with a free spell was pretty nice. Grief to clear the way was super awesome. I mean, duress and like get probe were both awesome. Like hand information is super important. I think it was just like it felt like a lot more like ticky tacky than a lot of cubes. Like it was all about these like little tiny trading and exchanges. And for a lot of the 2 of my matches, it was like here's the turn where we're both going to try to go off, and it just kind of becomes like a war of like resources at that point where it's like how much stuff do I have access to. It feels a lot like I don't know if you ever played Dan before but it's like it's kind of like that where it's like, oh, I'm trying to resolve a Dan and it now becomes memory lapse versus a counter spell versus brainstorm and cycling. It's a whole thing. So it was really interesting like that.
You mentioned going off there. I was curious what that looks like. Obviously, I see Murktide Regent in your pool. Imagine that was probably pretty strong for you. But overall, you mentioned the draws. How do you feel like things managed to close out? Like, did you ever feel like you and your opponent were just stuck, or was it always just waiting to pull that trigger?
No, it was definitely, and my deck definitely had fewer win cons than some other people's. There is like, it's control cube, but it does have some strategies that can actually kind of, go for face a little bit. But no, it was like Murktide Regent, and then, oh shoot, I'm gonna forget the name of this enchantment, Shadow of the Second Sun. There we go. Those were like the 2 big win cons that like I had to fight over because I had commenced the end game, which like if I have 6 cards in my hand and I cast Commence the End Game and I make an 8/8 and I can block that and I can back that up in some way, that usually is good enough.
Right, I really like the win conditions looking at your deck. So to hear that other people had more, very interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, overall looks like a good time. Glad to hear that this did well because it looks like it should.
I was worried that it was gonna be bad. When I was laying out the deck and I was like, oh, I really don't have a lot of ways to actually close out the game. And that's why my first match ended in a draw. My opponent was playing like a wasteland, like Ghost Quarter lock deck, which wasn't a problem for me as much because I didn't have any. I barely had any non-basics, but they had like these man lands that were just like super pressuring the life total. So we eventually went to time, and then it was just like trying to prevent them from killing me. It was a pretty close one at the end. And then I drew Magma Opus the turn after, but that was after turn, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so outside of the control cube, did you have like a favorite deck in the event? Was it the control cube deck or was it another one?
Yeah, no, my control cube deck was really cool. I liked it a lot. I mean, I liked most of the decks that I drafted. That was kind of the benefit of getting to try all these cubes is you get to draft cool stuff regardless. But the best deck that I drafted was with the ball pit, which was kind of like I wasn't even gonna draft it, but I saw it on TikTok like the week before the cube. And then everybody was talking about it on the ride up. They were like, "Oh, this is gonna be crazy." So I was super excited to I got to do that during the pre-draft on Thursday. So it
Okay.
was like a little bit more low stakes because it's kind of clown shoes concept. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, and this deck picture might look kind of weird to people. So just so we're clear, this is you draft a lot more cards, right? And then you have to play
yeah,
every card you draft.
yeah. So the cube is a 4 packs of 15 desert cube. You draft your entire mana base, and it's a 60 card pool, and you just play with your pool. So there are some cards in there that might not seem like they fit for the deck, but the central conceit of the cube is that every card can be cast on its backside as a chromatic sphere, which I assume Prose will pull up a picture of, but it's one tap sack, add a mana of any color, and then draw a card. So like the cube has a lot of cool theming around that fact. There's like almost no mana fixing. I think there's one of each basic land, and then a bunch of like the lands that only tap for colors if you control lands of those types,
Right.
like Nimbus Maze or whatever. But nobody has plains or islands, so they're just colorless lands that maybe if you get lucky could be mana fixing. Uh, so a lot of the time it was like you're building up your stash of chromatic spheres to eventually be able to have like these cool pop off turns where you cast like 2 spells with color on them. But my deck was 8 post
I was gonna
Tron.
say that's a lot of cloud posts and locusts you've got in this deck. So
Yeah, yeah.
no
So
respect.
yeah, no. I will say that I don't think that you could have drafted this exact deck on Friday. Like, I
Yeah.
think that this deck definitely wouldn't have made it to Friday afternoon or Saturday morning, just because like I was wheeling some cards that you definitely shouldn't wheel. Like I wheeled Cloud Posts, and I
Okay.
was already like I pack one pick one Urza's Tower into Nearby Planet, so I was just
Combo.
gonna do Tron regardless. I was like, oh, I know what I'm doing because this is supported. I hadn't even read the list really before that much, so I saw those cards and I was like, if this is here, then that means that I get to do the thing. And then I started to see the locusts come in, and I don't even think I got them all. Like I think some of them I just had to pass over other cards because I ran out of time to get win conditions that actually do things. The deck really just wins the game by getting to 30 mana and then your opponent concedes. Uh,
Is it 5 cloud posts? I know there's some
yeah,
with different art, but
yeah,
geez.
yeah. It was five. It was 5 cloud posts, and there was a game that I had all 5 of them in play, which was very fun.
Obviously, I assume the very expensive, impactful spells were really good for you, but anything else stand out during these games?
Oh, it's Staff of Domination was a house. Like
Yeah.
obviously, like if your deck has the kind of mana to support that, like there was a game in round 2 where my opponent had 4 creatures on the board and was putting +1/+1 counters on them every single combat. I think there's a Golgari guy that does that. I don't remember the exact guy, but every single turn it would just be go to combat, put a bunch of +1/+1 counters on my guys, and I would say, okay, tap all your guys, and then have mana left over to like make a token or something, or off of like one of the other trinkety artifacts. And eventually, my opponent was like, I actually just can't get past this, and
Right.
just had to concede, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, that was good. I really like Planar Bridge. Is that the 8 tap go and get
Hmm.
permanent out of the deck? That was really good.
So the deck looks really good, but obviously hard for us who didn't play the cube to understand what the power level of the cube is. How did you end up performing in this one?
Yeah, I 2-1'd. I was playing for the 3-0, and my opponent's deck was just phenomenal in the final round too. Both of our decks were really good. It was a great that match went to 3 games, and it was like super close. Like it came down to the last little bit, both ways. So it was a fun match, good time. My opponent's deck in round 3 was like super interactive in a way that like my deck doesn't have a ton. I have Maelstrom Pulse, which I will say, as a villain, I did get to Maelstrom Pulse a Chromatic Sphere when there were multiple on the battlefield,
Oh,
which was really fun. When I got to sack my Chromatic Spheres and then blow all theirs up, which
that's
did feel
illegal.
great. Yeah, I think that card might be a little mean for the cube, but I like doing it.
It's difficult to do though, because if they have even 1 mana up, they counter the
Yeah,
Maelstrom
they
Pulse.
they fully tapped out. They went like a lot of the times, like in this cube, it's like tap 3 mana, just drop 3 spheres, and then pass.
Hmm.
So that was one moment though that was really fun. Was just like punishing that concept.
Sphere, not even generous like Star would have been to let your
Nope.
opponent draw a bunch of cards. Just takes all the spheres out and they're done.
Yeah. No, it that was a whammy moment
Yeah.
in one of the games.
Well, that kind of leads into the next question, which maybe we already answered. But were
Fair.
there any other cool like any like big plays, big turns in any of the
Oh
cubes you
man,
played that you remember right off?
I think like every single turn in the Cascade cube, which I forget the name of this 5-drop enchantment. That's Wooburg.
The Nexus,
Uh,
right? Maelstrom
the
Nexus.
Nexus,
Maelstrom
Maelstrom
Nexus.
Nexus. Yeah. So Cascade Cube, for those that don't know, is it's a cube where you have a Maelstrom Nexus emblem when you start the game. So the entire cube is all around doing these like crazy plays where you cascade down into cool 0 drops on turn 1, like Lotus Bloom, Profane Tutor, stuff like that. But the cube is a ton of free spells. So like every turn is clown shoes chaos. It's like your opponent plays a 1-drop creature which turns into Soul Ring. Oh, but then you force of will their Soul Ring and then cast a 4-drop for free. You know what I mean? So it that entire cube, just watching other people's games happen as well as some of my stuff. Like I had Force Negation as one of my free spells, and Force Negation was a house because most of the free spells you're cascading into are non-creature spells. So if you can, you don't even have to like. It's a real good way to get around being on the draw because like being on the play is like nuts in the Cascade cube. I feel
Right.
like, but just the whole time with that cube, it was just like, oh, they just did something disgusting, like Solitude's in there, so like you just cast in it force. It was just so good.
Cool to hear that the counter spells are good. Like normally when we think of Cascade, counter spells are antithetical to
For
Cascade
sure, but
strategies. But
because you
obviously,
get those on your opponent's turn was the
yeah.
cool thing. Just because it's the first spell you cast each turn. So like on the draw, you're normally not getting to make a turn 1 play. So like there's the Phyrexian green spell that like lets you tuck a card from the graveyard. So your opponent pops off, they do their thing, they cast, I don't know, Lotus Bloom, and they put it in the graveyard, and then you get to put it on top of their deck and cascade into your 0-drop, which is fun. So yeah, Once Upon a Time's goat in that cube too, because obviously, that's
Yeah,
another free spell. There's just
I
so many
imagine
good
anything free is very good. Anything free
Yeah,
that you can cast on your opponent's turn. I mean, even if you're just pitch casting your subtlety at
yeah,
the end of their turn one, not countering anything. Just yeah,
yeah. Oh
it
yeah,
sounds
for
very
sure.
cool.
Subtlety's great. Yeah, Grief is crazy. Like every free spell was just pretty cool.
All right. Were there any cubes on your list that you did get to draft? I know we got to do 6 or 7, depending on whether or not people did all the drafts they could or not. But any of them that you missed out on that you wanted to check out?
I got to draft everything that was on my like initial pitch concept, like my top 4. I ended up drafting regardless, but the one cube that there were a lot of cubes that like as the days went on, people like were like, you all have to drop everything and try it. Like I drafted the Vistas cube because like a couple of people drafted that and really liked it. But Joey, you drafted the Bear Claw Changeling Cube, I think is what it was, and that one just like you were talking about your like Pyrogoyf concept for that one, and it was like I was like, oh, I have to find time to draft it.
Pyroglyph
Uh,
seems silly in this cube. Holy
yeah,
moly!
yeah, yeah. It's Pyrogoyf, and because every creature is every creature type. So every single creature in your deck triggers Pyroglyph's static ability. So or trigger. So that one was really cool. And then uh, our friend David drafted the Omnipresent cube, which that cube was nutty. Like I don't know, I've never used that card before. The like Omnipresent whatever, that like 2-drop
Yeah, the imposter.
basic creature, the Omnipresent Imposter. But that cube sounded just really cool. Just like a ton of different ways to search your deck. And then you get this guy out here, and there's just a ton of different cool, tight synergies around card names and card types because of that, which is just really cool. So, although I missed out on a couple of the like gimmicky ones, like I think that like the point of CubeCon, like it really shines with these like one-off kind of gimmicky cubes that you're not going to get a chance to draft again ever for the most part because it's so hard. Like it's so hard to pitch the concept of like, yeah, we should, find a way to get a hold of all the cards for Omnipresent Cube to draft it 1 or 2 times. It's like the 100 Ornithopters from last year that you all talked about where it's like, am I going to get 100 Ornithopters? Really? That just seems like an expensive concept.
Yeah, getting the cube is certainly not really an issue, but it just becomes a factor of like we're gonna draft it twice in the next 6 months, so like,
it's no vintage cube or whatever,
right,
or peasant cube, which like I drafted I drafted the peasant cube while we were in Madison, and it was a blast. But it's like I can draft peasant cube at home too.
Yeah, so that's pretty much all we had. I didn't know if you had any other thoughts, any other stories, or anything you wanted to share.
No, I don't think so. I mean, it was a blast. Thanks for inviting me. I'll say that. I wouldn't have thought to go on my own. So I'm glad that you all had such a great time last year and decided to go up again and bring a bigger squad because it was a good time.
I'm really glad that, from what I can tell, and maybe I'll hear otherwise from a couple other people. Although I think most of the people we're talking to today came last year, but one of my big fears was that like we were going to talk this event up and then people were going to come and not have a good time, and
it'd be like, this blows.
Yeah, it's like when you show a bunch of people a funny video on YouTube and they all just stare and not laugh at it, right? And you're just sitting there awkwardly. And you're like, oh no, what did I do? You show somebody your favorite movie and they hate it. It's just the fear is always there. So
no. It
was cool to hear that people had a good time.
No, the everything about it, top to bottom, perfect experience. Definitely going back next year.
That's what we like to hear.
And as Bryan leaves the call, we've picked up Matt. Say hi, Matt.
Hi, Matt. I'm Matt.
Welcome, Matt. Yeah, we could just go ahead and jump right back into our questions. So, first thing that we've got, what was your favorite cube that you got to draft at CubeCon this year?
My favorite cube was the Everywhere cube. It was very fun, very interesting draft, very fun games. Overall, just a blast.
Yeah, really, really cool in there. Just as a quick overview, that's the one where every basic land that you get after the draft is an Everywhere that the Overlord of the something,
Hauntwood.
the green one, Hauntwood makes. Yeah, so
and something interesting to note about this one, this version of the cube is, they're non-basic lands for the purposes of cards that care about that, and additionally, I've seen other versions of a cube like this before, where you just make all of the lands prismatic lands, just tap for all the colors, and this one's unique in that you don't have that effect. You don't have like a Caracas that is all 5 colors. You actually have just lands that tap for 5 colors. It's a little different, which made the draft a lot more interesting than just take the broken lands or the broken spells and you just cast all of them.
Yeah, I'm not even sure. I also drafted this cube and thought it was really cool, but
I think there were like 9 or 10 non-basics in the draft.
Okay,
they're like fetch lands, and then there's like Dwarven Mine and Mystic Sanctuary and those kinds.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, because I also had drafted a version of this cube before. It was a vintage cube with the same, like, if you had basic lands to your deck after. So it had a lot of the like Caracas and like Workshop and stuff in it as well. Those did not tap for extra colors, but anyways.
So obviously this cube is designed to where you get to play 5 color, just the best cards that you see every pick, but were there any cards that took advantage of the Everywhere theme that ended up in your deck, or what kind of deck do you remember ending up with?
I drafted like a 5-color zoo was the best way to describe it. I had both Curdape and Loam Lion in my deck, and then just a bunch of generic good interactive cards and creatures to force damage through. Um, I think the cards that took the most advantage of the theme were the Knight of the Wood Orchid I had, the 2 aforementioned 1-drops, and then Vidalcan Shackles,
Hmm.
which just
Oh, yeah.
crushed my opponents whenever I played it. Like, yeah, it's not the best in my deck because I'm an aggro deck, but it just removes a blocker every turn at the very least, and it against some opponents they just can't ever win. So.
Yeah.
Right,
Shackles
phenomenal
is
top end.
absolute home run in this cube, I think. Yeah. I actually had a, not to divert too much with my experience, but when I had posted my deck, I'd actually gotten a response from the cube owner who said that he had noticed over time a strong correlation between people who properly valued Vidalcan Shackles and people who did well in this cube. So
Makes sense.
Well, that leads to my question, Matt. How did you end up faring with this deck?
That was the first draft that I did. It was on the preview day or whatever it was called, and I 3-0'd this draft. My deck was
nice.
quite good.
Very
I
cool.
think the weakest cards were the 2 Loam Lions, but they were like the only 1-drops I had in my deck aside from Mother of Runes, so it was perfectly reasonable. Getting my curve off early, and they've synergized well enough with my other stuff going on that they were good.
And Prose mentioned I as well also drafted this, so all 3 of us in the call have drafted this cube during the event. And I do not remember the curves being this low. Did you find that a lot of your opponents just weren't able to keep up with your aggro? Like, were they trying to do bigger stuff, or did you not even get to see some of it running them
Um,
over so fast?
the weirdest part about this draft for me was that I can remember 2 of the 3 matches I played, and um, in both matches, games went very long. Like
Interesting.
I won long games. Like one of my games, my opponent resolved Prismatic Bridge, the backside of Asika or whatever, whichever one it is.
Yeah.
And their game plan, their deck was really cool. Their game plan was to either play Prismatic Bridge or Koth of the Hammer, with enough lands in play to double their mana up to casting Emrakul the Eon's Torn, which was really cool. But um, I I had a game against them where they prismatic bridged like 4 or 5 times, and it took them finally hitting Sundering Titan to actually win that game. Um, Otherwise, I was just very easily rolling all over them. And then the following games, like I would routinely get to probably 7 to 8 lands in play in my deck with 17 lands and Curdape, and it was not bad because my deck has like Luris and like Baleful Strix and Vidalcan Jackals and company for top end that still generates value. So even when I'm flooding out, I'm still gonna be generating card advantage and stuff.
Right, modern aggressive cards, Felia being one that we also see in Vintage Cube, but I feel like in Vintage Cube we see the same thing where the aggro cards have a lot of more staying power now. So it's interesting to hear that you were finding that staying power here with this deck. It makes sense also that maybe the zoo creatures, to hear that the zoo creatures were on the lesser end of good when your games were going that long.
Yeah, they weren't amazing, but I think they were crucial still because I think my
Hmm.
deck needed to get off the ground running. Like even though I can go long, I don't think I'm always favored going long. So making it so my opponent has to spend resources early so that when we get to that point they're a little bit farther behind is still important. Um and I think those two getting the early chip damage in so maybe I can steal a late game with something like Flage, dealing them 6 or whatever, or the Geomorph guy at Imago, I think is his name. Just turning creatures into 6/6 flyers because I have enough lands in play. Um, or 6/6, they don't get flying. He has flying. Stuff like that. So I think they were important, but not great.
Okay, so that was your favorite cube. What was your favorite deck from the event? Was it this one, or was there another cube that you liked your deck in more?
while the cube was very fun and the draft was interesting, I don't think it was my best or most fun deck that I drafted. I think my favorite deck was my deck that I drafted in the Changeling Cube. Um, because while kind of a headache to play a little bit, um, I think my deck was the way that I describe it to others is that I felt like I was drafting a completely different cube than my opponents. Um, I was drafting a combo deck, um, centered around Gravecrawler, while my opponents were trying to play a bunch of Lord of Atlantises. Um, and that's most of what my opponents were doing. They were all trying to just like have some creature synergies and attack me, where I was trying to just combo off with Gravecrawler and deal them infinite damage with Walking Ballista or kill all of their creatures forever with what's the name of the thing? I think it's Deathspore Thallid. So it was a very different draft. I think my deck was very, very good. I don't think there was any piece that I was missing exactly, if I can remember correctly.
Phenomenally low curve looking at this. Like, this is a low curve cube in general, but I am not surprised to hear that this deck did well in this cube. I also drafted this cube, and people in my pod were heavy on 3s and 4s, I found, and getting in under them. I lost my 3-0 match in this cube to the Deathspore Thallid, so it and the Gravecrawler combo is vicious. You mentioned Infinite. Is that off of the Slingang Commander or Slingang Lieutenant?
So I had a couple of infinites in the deck. They all centered on Gravecrawler. Actually, I think I could back up with I don't remember his name. He's the 4 mana cleric guy that's like a cleric scrap trawler. But there are two cards that are really important to the combo in Birchlore Ranger. So I can tap my Gravecrawler and another creature that I generate over and over again for the mana to cast Gravecrawler. So with Birchlore Ranger and Gravecrawler plus Wirewood Hive Master, that's just infinite enters the battlefield triggers if I have a way to sacrifice them. If I can sacrifice my Gravecrawler, so I have like Deathspore Thallid or Utopia Mycid, um, or Skull Clamp also works. Slinging Lieutenant, stuff like that too. Yeah, tough to sacrifice the Gravecrawler over and over again. I just keep recasting with Birchlore Ranger and Elvish Wired Hive Master. But the real combo, honestly, is just Utopia Myconid and Gravecrawler, because that lets me sacrifice the Myconid to sacrifice a Saproling for a black mana or for mana of any color. But Gravecrawler is a Saproling in this cube, so it just those two cards by themselves just let me cast Gravecrawler infinite times. So if I just have those two plus anything, I can kill my opponent. Like I can make infinite zombies with Headless Rider, or drain them infinitely with the Wayward Servant. Or in one game, I had the Hive Master plus the Myconid and the Gravecrawler, made infinite mana, and then just cast Walking Ballista and dealt them infinite damage. Um, or I can just mow down all of their creatures forever with the Thallid, and then they can never actually kill me. There was a lot of redundancy built into this, with a lot of card draw, with Glimpse of Nature, and Skull Clamp, and then a lot of tutoring with Survival of the Fittest and the Treeful Carbinger. So I could kind of just get whatever I wanted. I also had Crypt Breaker to draw me cards too, because all of my creatures are vampires or zombies. So as I'm comboing off, I'm just gonna draw extra cards until I find my pieces. Um, I had a backup if I didn't find the Gravecrawler as I was drafting. I had Hakon in my sideboard, which basically turns all of my creatures into Gravecrawler. But the only way I had to get it into the graveyard was Survival. So I was kind of looking for Gravecrawler the whole draft, and I found it in pack 3. And interestingly, one last anecdote I want to mention about this. I At the end of the draft, um, in my round 3, someone in the pod asked me how I like figured out this was possible, like how I knew that this was a thing, because he also noticed that I was just doing something completely different than everyone else. Like I just was playing a different game. Um, and I explained to him that like there was originally another Changeling cube in the going to be in CubeCon that dropped out last minute, and I wanted to draft that one a lot. And the difference between the two is that one was power maxed. It was intended to be as powerful as possible, and you define combos like that and do something broken. So I had done a little research planning to draft that cube and planned on potentially drafting an archetype like this because I know it's possible. And when that one dropped out and I ended up in this draft and I just like started getting fed cards that were very good in that theme, I just settled on it again. And it was very fun. Couple things I want to mention about this. Rograk was very good. Just side note. Surprisingly
Especially with
good.
the mana production guys, it seems
Yeah.
like, yeah.
I think Rograk. I think any of the 0 mana creatures are all really good in this deck. They're very good with the Birch Rangers that you mentioned, but they also draw off Glimpse of Nature. And I on turn 1 against one of my opponents played Rograk, Birchlaw Ranger, tap them both, cast another spell on turn 1, which was very gross. And worst comes to worst, I can always just like clamp it or survival it away. The other thing I want to mention, I sideboarded out Pact of the Serpent in literally every match. It looks good on paper, but it is incredibly slow. And if my opponent is just like beating me down, it does nothing. I can get very similar effects with a lot of the cards in my deck, like Skimfar Avenger or Glimpse of Nature. I don't really need it, but when I was deck building, I thought it was good enough, and it probably would have been. It was just worse than whatever I boarded in every time. So, yeah, that's about how I feel about this draft. It was fun. I just feel like I did something very different than what everyone else was doing, drafting a different cube.
Yeah, very different from my experience in the Changeling Cube, though I did lose the finals, as I mentioned, to Death Sports Thalet, so I had seen how powerful that card was here, so...
Maybe actually the same then.
Maybe the same, but my opponent was also doing aggro stuff. He was on Champion of the Parish, because Champion of the Parish and Champion of the Perished, so...
And I ended up losing in the finals with this. While I did think, like, after looking at everyone's deck on paper, I think my deck was the best at the table. I think I ran a little bad in the matchup. My opponent, this was pretty fun story. My opponent cast Dwarven Recruiter and stacked his deck because every creature's a dwarf. And he showed me when he did that he had Tivadar of Thorn, which is just a 3 mana Vindicate because every creature's a goblin. But I, from playing the rest of the game, found out that Tivadar was very low in his stack. So I had Survival in play and Deathspore Thalid, and Gravecrawler. So I was able to just mow down every creature he had in play, every turn, equal to the number of black mana I had, obviously. And if I drew a single creature at any point in that sequence, I just can never stop killing all of his creatures because I just find Wirewood Hive Master and then just double all of my Gravecrawler sacrifices or just start making 1/1s to just like attack him with. But I bricked on Survival for 4 turns in a row, and when your opponent is guaranteed to draw a creature every turn, it's a little hard to come back from that, even when you're killing all of his stuff. So I ended up losing that matchup, but I do think my deck was probably the best at the table. So yeah.
All right. Were there any cubes that you didn't get the chance to draft that you would, given the opportunity now?
Yeah, there was actually
any that you feel like you missed out on?
One of the cubes that it's an unconventional pick, but one of the cubes that I really wanted to draft was, I think it was called the Melded Mardu Monarchy, I think is what it's called. It's a Mardu cube.
The Melded Mardu Monarchy. Yeah.
It's a Mardu cube, so there's no blue or green cards, and it has heavy emphasis on the monarchy theme and meld mechanics, which the meld is kind of irrelevant to me in most instances. There's not really a ton of playable meld cards, but the monarchy aspect, I think, while monarch, like the monarch as a mechanic, is not very fun if there's like 1 or 2 cards that make you the monarch. I think when there are tons of cards that make you the monarch, it gets a lot more interesting because you're not stuck under the Palace Jailer. You can just play your own card that makes you the monarch and get your creature back. You don't actually have to hit them. and it sounded a lot more interesting. Plus, I just love Mardu cards. I like playing black mid-range value engines, and this cube just looked really fun. Had fun themes and all that stuff. But I think it was one of the like 50% of the cubes or whatever that didn't get drafted this year. I didn't see it drafted at any point, and I put it top of my list the second half of the event and never got it. So I think it just wasn't high on people's lists.
I can understand the meld scaring people off a bit. I like the design of this cube looking through it now, as it clearly understands that the monarchy is going to be a part of the game, so it's designed with the idea in mind to find creative ways to take it back outside of, as you mentioned, playing your own monarchy cards. There's a good number of evasive and hasty creatures to let you kind of steal the monarch back.
It looked very interesting. It looks like looking at this that it did get drafted once, but it just piqued my interest. I'm not huge on the like color centric cubes in general, because I like staying open. I like all the colors, all that stuff. However, I just naturally like am predisposed to liking Mardu stuff, and that just led me to really look forward to drafting this cube. It was on my short list, but just never quite made it, which made me a little sad. But yeah.
Were there any other stories other than the stuff you had told us, that any other cool things or anything that happened?
Yeah, there was one other pretty cool moment that I wanted to mention. I wanted to shout out about the Everywhere Cube. When I was in my final match, it was 3 games. Across the 3 games, I think I had the card Baleful Strix enter the battlefield 10 times in 3 games.
That's a lot.
In I think 2 of the 3, I led Baleful Strix on to copy my Baleful Strix with Mockingbird into them killing my Baleful Strix, and then me casting Luris and casting Baleful Strix again, and then restoring my Baleful Strix. And my opponent just could not like get past it, because he was also doing like a mid-range / aggro big creature like Territorial Kavu style aggro deck, and Baleful Strix is very good against those. The only game that I lost against him was to Najila in a long board stall, giving all of his creatures trample and just running over me. But
Yeah.
it was very fun to just like get to draw a billion cards with Baleful Strix in 3 games.
Very, very cool.
Between the cards you mentioned and Felia, it makes sense that could get a lot of ETBs on some effects.
For sure.
Yeah, so any other thoughts, stories, anything you wanted to share from the event? You were one of the other returners, although I believe last year you didn't play in the main event,
I
right?
did
You just
not.
open played?
No, I don't have a ton of more thoughts on like any particular things that happened. I think overall CubeCon was very fun again this year. I plan on going back next year. I do think I'm undecided at this point. I'm probably going to draft the main event again, mainly because I feel like getting side drafts to fire might be a little difficult again, because it felt like there might have been a little bit less people this year. I don't know if it's going to be back to the same numbers that were last year, this upcoming year, but I think I had a little bit more fun in general last year because I didn't have like a strict schedule I had to affix to. If I wanted to like take an hour break and just hang out and play on my Switch or whatever, or watch drafts and not feel like I have to draft, that was nice. But at the same time, I do want to just like do better. I want to be better than I was this year and make it to top 64, top 8, that kind of stuff. So I do want to play in it in the main event next year, but I also would enjoy also potentially not. I don't know. Because I think I had more fun not in the main event than in the main event, but it's still an incredible time. It's still like 8, 9 out of 10, but last year might have been 9 or 10 out of 10, you know?
I think that's a helpful note for anyone who we could maybe talk to about just the experience of going to CubeCon. Like, I didn't get to do much open play, but hearing about your experience last year doing it, if anyone, like we obviously were there from Wednesday through Monday to play all 4 days of the main event, plus our travel days. But if anyone's able to come up to Madison just for the weekend, like that open play area, they are firing a bunch of cubes. Definitely an experience worth noting.
For sure.
All right, so no need to swap people out this time, but we are going to just jump into chatting about Joey's CubeCon experience. So, yeah, we could just go on right in with what was your favorite cube that you got to draft at CubeCon.
So I was torn between the Changeling Cube, which we've already talked about, and the Truly Maddening Tempo Cube. Mouthful of a name, Truly Maddening Tempo Cube, but what it boils down to is it's a very low curve synergy cube. The synergies are more like minor overlaps. You're definitely going to build towards a theme, but those themes will contain sub themes a lot of the time. And I have a synergy cube myself that we play here in the league in Louisville. Very similar design philosophy. This one is a little bit bigger and cuts the curve off at 3 instead of 4, and has a bunch of different themes in kind of shifting for that, I suppose. But really enjoyed this cube. Had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, are we sure this isn't your cube? I see here it's designed by Joey the Jug. Are you moonlighting?
No, I actually spent some time on the last day walking around looking at all the playmats they give the people who entered the event, playmats with their cube written on it. And I did keep my eye out during the event for if I saw any playmats with Joey the Jug on them to have a chat about our very similar design philosophy. But jokes aside, like, there are a lot of themes in this cube that aren't in my synergy cube because, again, they are less overarching. The deck I drafted will not make that apparent, but I think the equipment theme just slots in a lot more easily here than it does in a lot of other synergy cubes, and that's why I don't like the equipment as an overarching theme and don't have it in my synergy cube. Here it fits in really well. What I ended up drafting was a graveyard based deck. Taking a look at it here, you'll see Hogak, very, very powerful card in the
We
deck.
love the gag.
Definitely the most powerful. One thing I noted about the cube was it looked like it had very good fixing, but it being a 540 means that you're actually seeing a smaller portion of them than I would realize. So other people had a lot of color issues. I didn't really have color issues. You see, I have a fetch and an overgrown tomb to get, along with an underground sea for that Urberg Lurgoyf up in the top right corner, which I did kick with its blue kicker once, so a justified pick on that underground sea. I do think I misbuilt my mana slightly, should have had one less forest, one more swamp, and I say that because I got stuck off of enough black mana for a turn multiple times, but that's entirely on me grabbing the wrong basics. I have 10 green sources here, 9 black sources, and I think it should just be slightly the other way around. Having Satyr Wayfinder and Enoch Wayfarer made me lean heavier green than I should have for what is clearly a very black deck looking at it now.
I did have a follow-up question, actually. You mentioned that you have a tempo cube that we draft in Louisville and that they have some overlap. Did you pick up any sort of design philosophies or anything from this cube that you might um, take back with your design for the tempo cube that we play?
I am surprised how much of a difference cutting off the curve at effective 3 mana is from effective 4, because effective 4 brings a lot of haymakers into it that are fun to build themes around. Like this theme, for example, has Sidisi at 4, but a lot of themes in my cube that have themes at 4 just don't work at 3. And same thing here, some of these 3s I don't think have as flashy or as like iconic of payoffs at 4. So I think that not really, though I think I don't have Hogak in my list because I assumed it would be too powerful. And one story I have from the event is I cast Hogak in a game, I think 3 times, and I lost that game. So I have revised my opinion on how powerful Hogak is. Hogak will be going in our Synergy Cube if it isn't already. I think that's the only big change. I was a little bit sick with General Con crud by the day I played this, so I don't think I played it great. I probably could have won that game somehow when I cast Hogak 3 times. There surely must have been a line
Oh,
somewhere.
yeah.
But
Well, that does kind of lead in. Did you have a deck from the event that was your favorite, aside from this
it,
one,
it,
or was it this one?
it was this one. I
Okay.
drafted a lot of decks I really liked. I think that this was just getting to cast Hogak, and I enjoy low curve Magic back when Tiny Leaders was the hot format for a moment, that smaller commander format where decks mats out at 3 mana. Like, I like small ball Magic, low curve Magic, and White of the Reliquary is a card that since it's come out I've really enjoyed playing and in the environment it gets to be a part of. So ultimately this felt like exactly the kind of Magic I want to play, and I feel like I brought dishonor to Hogak with my 1-2 finish in this draft, but ultimately, yeah, we talked to Bryan, who mentioned doing a bunch of the wackier cubes. Outside of this cube, I did a bunch of wacky cubes and really enjoy a lot of those decks, but it's hard for them outside of that exact time to be something I reflect on as much as, like, I really like this deck.
Yeah, not surprised to hear that you enjoyed this cube and the deck you built in it, because I know you were looking forward to drafting this for a lot of the weekend. So, were there? What about any cool stories from your perspective? Any cool plays or turns you had, other than casting Hogak 3 times in a game?
So my stories, I have 2 each from the same match in the Prismatic, or Vistas Unventured is, I believe, the name of the cube. It is a desert cube, but it's a desert cube on easy mode because you get 6 of the lands from the beginning: Prismatic, Vista, and 5 basics, 1 of each basic. And the the main thing I want to say that happened there was I had a game where my opponent and I were both very low on life, and they activated a Shifting Woodlands on a Golos in their graveyard, so not going to get its enter the battlefield effect. This is just to get a 3/5. I think they maybe had enough mana to activate Golos because they did have enough mana to activate Shifting Woodlands again, I remember, because I ended up escaping my Cling to Dust to exile the Golos, and they thought for a moment, and maybe they were thinking about activating the Shifting Woodland in to make sure they get their 3/5, but me gaining 3 life meant that 3/5 was no longer enough to finish me off. Again, my opponent and I were both very low. They had a slightly advantageous position. And if they had enough mana to spin Golos, I think I made the right play. But reflecting back on it, if their plan was to animate Golos and make an Alpha Strike, I was giving my opponent, because I knew my opponent to be a good Magic player, I was giving them credit that they remembered I had a Cling to Dust in my graveyard. And reflecting back on it, there's a chance that they were just trying to attack for lethal, and I could have ambushed with the Cling to Dust in my graveyard, gaining 3 life to survive that lethal swing. So, slightly missed that, maybe, I don't know. And then, just a couple of turns later, my opponent is making another lethal swing, but I think I have won the game with Sublime Epiphany to copy one of my creatures to block and to bounce one of their creatures to prevent lethal. And then because they had to all-out attack, I get them on the backswing. The issue is that Sublime Epiphany is countered in this weird case by Ashaya. Ashaya is a creature that turns all of your creatures into forest. And Sublime Epiphany can return a non-land card to your opponent's hand. And my opponent immediately pointed this out. And it was like, I am
That's
devastated.
savage.
And
Yeah.
scooped, and that was my last I think that was literally my last game of the event. This was the last day. I wasn't feeling well, so I didn't play the last match of that draft. But it was still, This is Unventured was a fun draft environment, and I had a great time that match. But I do reflect on both those moments. The Sublime Epiphany one's just funny. Ashaya blocking.
You know, a story is great when a story sticks with somebody from an event and it's their bad beat story. So
Yeah, but I got bad beats kind of twice in that same game.
yeah,
One of them sticks with me because I could have made a better play, but the Sublime Epiphany saying non-land
yeah,
is... I'm going to remember that forever.
yeah. Was there a cube that you missed out on that you'd like to draft given the opportunity? Any specific ones you missed out on?
I mentioned that I did Vistas Unventured, which is kind of half a desert cube, but for me it didn't even really feel like that because my cube group will tell you that I often draft so many non-basics in a draft that I rarely need more than 6 lands from the land station anyway. So to me, I didn't do any true desert cubes while we were there. The Lavender Cube, which is a Jeskai desert cube, is the one I really wish I had gotten to do. I wish I had done a true desert cube at all, and the Lavender Desert is just the highest of them on my list. It looks like it has a lot of cool stuff going on. Jeskai is kind of my favorite 3-color combination in Magic, so I really enjoy a lot of what the synergies and archetypes are here. This is another one where it feels like it has a lot of small packages, not necessarily large archetypes that you're building your entire 23 playables around, but maybe you're building an artifact general theme, but then you have a couple of small artifact packages that work really well together, but not with everything else inside of that. Or spells matter, but like you have spells that matter that when you draw your second card, but you also just have general spells matter cards. So a lot of cool stuff in this cube. Regret not getting to draft it. If it's at next CubeCon, it'll be very high on my list.
All right, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So, any other thoughts you had from a first-time CubeCon attendee?
This made me remember how much I enjoy tournaments that are at cons, by which this is at Gamehole Con. I have played in an invitational that I believe was at the Origins Game Fair in Columbus, Ohio. I've played in some kind of tournaments that have been at Gen Con and Indy over the years. Just being at a larger event where you get to the benefit of that larger event, the exhibitor hall with a bunch of cool stuff to look at, food trucks we had at here that are at bigger cons but often not at Magic tournaments. It just adds an overall vibe to the event more than just going to a tournament. So it's really cool to get back to that because it's been, I want to say, like 7 or 8 years since I've been to a Magic tournament that is attached to an existing con.
Yeah. All right, so we've gotten rid of Matt. We've brought Scott in his place. Welcome, Scott.
Hello. Hello.
Yep, here to chat some more about CubeCon. So we can just hop right into it, I guess. We've been starting out with what was your favorite cube that you got to draft at CubeCon this year?
Oh, yeah, that would definitely be the Ravnica Time Spiral standard sort of flashback cube. I actually populated my list going into the event, like full of nostalgia cubes, and then quickly learned that those cubes were going to attract a lot of like players who've been playing for a really long time and would make my tournament much harder. So I backed off a little bit, but this was the third cube I played in the main event, and I was sitting at 5-1 already, so I felt like I could take a little gamble on playing a bunch of really good players. And yeah, this cube was extremely fun and hit me exactly in the nostalgia, right where I wanted it to. Just like kind of right when I started playing like tournament Magic was around this time, so I knew all the cards. I loved all the interactions. It was just an absolute blast.
Yeah, so just briefly, probably obvious from the name, but these are all cards that were legal in the Ravnica and Time Spiral standard, which means we have the Ravnica block, the Time Spiral block, Cold Snap 9th and 10th edition in there. So, yeah, just fully a snapshot of a standard format, essentially. And we can take a quick peek at your deck. Does look like this cube broke some singleton rules for some
It
staples. I
did.
see some lands.
It did,
I-
yeah.
I think that's somewhat common with standard or cubes or any that try to capture a specific era, though, because a lot of the time you're dealing with a smaller pool, but also there are cards that had an outsized impact on that format, and sometimes having more of those.
Yeah,
is nice to
definitely.
see.
Definitely didn't mean that as a slight. More of just an observation that popped in when looking at my head, looking at the deck here.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I drafted this after Prose drafted it. You drafted it on day one, right?
Yeah, I think it was the first main event draft that I did it. Yeah.
Yeah, and we ended up playing like basically the same archetype.
Yeah.
I watched some of your games in that first draft, and I think you got a really nice like Celestial Crusader blowout situation.
Mhm.
And I when I opened my initial pack, I think I pack one Dark Confidant. I was like, oh, I'll just do the same thing, you know.
Yeah.
And it really all came together. Like I wheeled everything I wanted and got a pretty nice deck here.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely like the look of it. And yeah, Celestial Crusader was really strong for me. I think it was actually my pack one pick one when I drafted this. But yeah,
Now-
pretty solid looking deck here.
I feel like this is before my time, but I have heard tale of Mangara timing activations. I notice you have Stonecloaker and the Lion here. Did you have any opportunities throughout the draft to get double value off of a Mangara?
Unfortunately, not. I really wanted to, which is why like I was excited about putting all of those cards in my deck. Because they're a little mopey and whatnot otherwise, but I tried. I gave it my all, but it just never came together.
Yeah, for people not familiar, Mangara is a card that taps to exile it and another target creature. But the exiling is not part of the cost of Mangara, so you can activate the ability of Mangara and then sacrifice it to Ghost Council, return it to your hand with Stonecloaker or the White Mane Lion, and still exile your opponent's thing. So yeah, pretty brutal one there. How did you end up doing with this deck?
I 2-1'd. I lost to Ben White's. Still not clear on if he's a current or a former WotC employee, but a very, very good player. He just sort of manhandled me with Glare of Subdual and a bunch of token makers, and I didn't have a ton of interaction for that stuff, so I just kind of got crushed.
Weird. I also lost to a Wizards employee. Crazy.
Cheating. No, it was great. It was a fun match. I wish I had a little more agency in it, but that sometimes the cards break that way.
That is a thing that happens, yeah. So moving on, what would you say is your favorite deck of the event? I assume it probably wasn't that one, given.
No, it was one of my 3-0s. I'm going to be that guy. But I think this deck is interesting. So this was from the first draft I did in the main event. This was called the Sandman Cube, and this cube did not stay eligible for drafting for the entire tournament because, well, so the idea behind the cube is that there are very, very few creatures, and you're going to win most of your games by animating creature lands and attacking your opponent with those. Given that, when I saw a couple of bounce spells in pack 1, I thought, well, if my opponent is going to tap like 4 or 5 mana to animate their land and then tap that land to attack me, bouncing it seems really good. And so I just settled into like a blue-black control deck that basically has no win conditions. I mean, there's like the Ugin, and I honestly ended up milling people with Villainous Wealth more than I did like casting it to play their spells. So I ended up with this like essentially do nothing, be really annoying control deck that couldn't win the game on its own, basically, and that's how all my games played out. And it took a really long time, but that's my bread and butter. I really, really enjoyed playing those games, mostly because I felt like I couldn't ever lose any of them. But
You have two of the best man lands in Hall of the Storm Giants and Creeping Tar Pit, but never had any games where you felt like it was just attacking with the man lands that got you there.
Look, I was being a little hyperbolous. That's not a word. I was using
Hyperbolic.
a little bit. Yeah, I was. Yeah,
Hyperbolous.
I was employing some hyperbole. I did like I think the first game I played in the draft overall, I like played an early tar pit and copied it with Thespian Stage and just sort of like killed my opponent over a few turns with those. And you know, I got in for some with Hall of the Storm Giant some, but most of the time my opponents were just tapping out due to fatigue or you know inevitability or whatever.
Yeah, I specifically remember this was the draft I was drafting that Ravnica cube, and I think we were like right next to each other. And both you know, when we were talking about the cube, I was excited. I had this one on my list, and then I think at one point after I had finished my first round, I walked over to ask how your draft was going, and you told me that you guys had just finished drafting.
Yeah.
And
The
then
actual draft portion took close to 90 minutes, I think.
yeah,
On top of it being like a lot of weird cards people didn't know. The people in my pod were just not very fast. I mean,
yeah,
I don't want to cast aspersions, but you know,
yeah.
many
But
matches in that draft went to a 1-0 time decision. If that
right.
is any other.
Yeah, I did catch some gameplay at one point, and I remember going back and telling my opponent that this looks like a cube that I would love to draft in an untimed environment because the clock does not seem like it's your friend with this one.
This deck does look really sweet. The more I look at it, the more I'm like, I would like this deck if you didn't tell me that the main way to win was man lands. Like, this deck just looks good generally.
You would say that.
Well, I think there's a kernel of truth there, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
a solid like control deck, but the like the boomerang might look a little out of place or whatever, but like man, it is a huge tempo play in this cube. So I don't know. Noticing those like small differences, I think really helped out.
All right. And you said that you threw up. Never mind. I don't need to ask that.
Yeah.
Were there what was the like coolest play or board state or game or anything that happened to you? You have any specific memories there? I know it's been a
Yeah.
couple weeks
So
now.
yeah, I wanted to highlight the play that like I guess locked me into the top 64, which was a cut I missed the previous year. I was drafting one of the essentially vintage cubes in the format with real power, which was very cool. And I ended up in like a blue black reanimator kind of deck that I generally don't think is very good in those environments, but that's where I ended up. So I just had to you know play my best. And I found myself in this position in game 3 of the second round. This being the draft where you only needed 2 match wins to advance. So I had my 1 match win and I was trying to get my second. And my opponent had killed me out of nowhere in one of the previous 2 games with a sneak attack and Blightsteel Colossus. So that's sort of like I felt some pressure to like get this game over with. So from a relatively empty board, I think I had a Psychic Frog, maybe another like little dude or something. I played a Surveillant and saw a Necromancy on top of my library with a graveyard full of things already. And I thought for a long time about like milling it because I already had an Animate Dead I was about to cast, and then I realized that I could do this play, which was Animate Dead, keep the Necromancy on top, Animate Dead, Atali, use the Atali to cast whatever my opponent's card was, and my Necromancy to get back Caves of Chaos Adventurer, which put me to the final room of that dungeon, Throne of the Dead 3, which let me then put a giant Dothy Voidwalker into play, a 6/5, I guess. It's not giant, but pretty big. And so I ended this turn with like a massive amount of power that is like a lot of it very evasive or whatever, and my opponent had to basically kill me on his turn, and Blightsteel was not going to be enough because I had that more than covered with my board. So I made that play. I was feeling great about it. My opponent untaps and casts a time spiral, and essentially was like, I can either try and figure out how to kill you from here, or you're going to win. So he ended up taking like what felt like an enormous amount of time, but ultimately decided he could not get the job done and conceded. And then I was through to the top 64.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, I wish those games were on camera because I think my deck was pretty poor. I mean, I had a Time Walk, I had a Psychic Frog, like I had powerful cards. It's Vintage Cube, but I just think that archetype is pretty bad. And my round 1 opponent just like channels me on turn 2 and easily wins that game. And I'm just like, Oh my god, my tournament's ending, and I'm not really gonna play any games. And I don't know. I just like locked in and played really, really, really tight. I feel like, and managed to advance, and it felt really good.
Very, very cool. Um, were there any cubes that you feel like you missed out on? You draft given the opportunities now.
You know, I think looking at the list, I might have just said no, but hearing the way that a lot of our group talked about the Everywhere Cube, I feel like I got to try that at some point. And I didn't get to it at the tournament, but I don't know. Maybe we'll put together a copy or something at some point. But everyone was just speaking so highly about it. I feel like I got to get my hands on it.
Right, right. Yeah, we've definitely talked about it a lot, and maybe mild spoiler, we're going to talk about it a little more here in a minute. But yeah, that's a big good choice there.
Cool.
That's pretty much all from me. Unless there's something else from you, Joey, Scott, is there any other just anything else you want to talk about with the event? Any other thoughts or?
Yeah, I just want to stress this. This was my second year going to CubeCon, and the first year I went, it was the best tournament I've ever played in, and I've been playing Magic tournaments for around 20 years, maybe a little more.
Old.
Yeah, true. And I know Magic players are prone to hyperbole again, but it was just like revelatory how fun this tournament was. Maybe it's just for me, but I loved it. And so going back this year, I expected a good time, and somehow this year surpassed the previous year. And I don't even like what's the next year going to bring? Because like, can the times get better?
Yeah.
I would have said no if that was asked to me last year, and then they did get better. So like, go to CubeCon, people. If you're watching this video, you're at all interested in it, like start planning, start saving, go to CubeCon next year, please. That's it. That's all I got.
Cosign.
So, Prose, you've been commenting on all of our thoughts. Questions now turned back on you. Which of the cubes was your favorite cube throughout the weekend?
The cube, my favorite cube from the weekend was the very first one I drafted, and maybe not one that I would have expected to put in this spot going in, but I went with the Teamer Spellslinger cube for the prequel draft on Thursday, and we've mentioned a little bit before how when I draft a new cube, a lot of times if I don't really know what's going on, I crawl into my safe little hole of just drafting Teamer decks with burn spells and big monsters in them, and this cube was basically just a pile of those things. So I had a really good time drafting it, felt really comfy while doing it, and had just absolutely a ton of fun, throughout both the draft and actually playing the decks here.
I remember watching your 3-0 match at the end of it, and it was a sight to see.
Yeah, it was quite the cube and quite the match there in the finals one. This is the deck that I actually ended up drafting. This deck actually featured a few cards that I had not read before I drafted this cube, specifically Joel Rail and the Sibylline Soothsayer, both of which were just incredible. But I could have drafted this deck in like any cube that had all these cards in it and been perfectly fine with it, but being able to do it in this cube where that was basically the only way to go ruled.
And I mentioned watching your finals match and seeing a bunch of cool stuff. I'm now remembering that you told me after that match you had heavily sideboarded, because I remember a lot of top-end haymakers that aren't in this picture that showed up in that very grindy final match.
I cannot remember the name of that card off the top of my head. The card that won me that match. So my third round was against a player who had Sprout Swarm, which I have Scoot Swarm. I think Sprout Swarm is probably pretty close to that on the power axis of cubes that they are normally in, which is to say that I think that they're both among the best cards in any cube that they're in. Because my opinion on those cards is generally that they're either among the best cards in the cube or they're completely unplayable. And they are certainly not unplayable in this cube. So yeah, I can't remember the name of the spell, but it's like it
Call
costs, I
forth
think,
the Tempest.
call forth the tempest. That's it. Yeah. So it's 4 red and X, I believe.
3 red, 5.
Okay,
Unless
3
I'm
red and
thinking
5. Yeah, yeah.
of
The X
the wrong
is the X
spell.
is the damage. No, you're right. So it's 3 red and 5. You cascade twice, and then you deal damage to your opponent's creatures equal to the total mana value of cards. Other spells cast this turn, essentially. So my opponent had a dwarven. I can't remember the name of the card. The guy that whenever you cast or copy a spell, you get a treasure. He had that and Sprout Swarm and Storm Spell. So he had essentially an infinite combo present in his deck. But it was game 3. We'd had a really grindy game 1, a pretty one-sided game 2, and he sold out. He cast his Sprout Swarm without buyback, cashed in pretty much all of his treasures to cast the Storm Spell that makes Prowess Dragons. And I knew that, as you can see here, I don't have anything that costs 1 in my deck, so if I cast that Call Forth the Tempest, it was always going to cascade into at least 4 damage worth of spells that I could cast, so was able to cast that, clear off his board, and win the match from there. But yeah, it was just very cool. Very good time in this cube overall.
Was it this deck or one of the other decks you played throughout the weekend that ended up being your favorite?
My favorite, I said we were going to revisit it, and we'll revisit it now. My favorite was the deck that I drafted in the Everywhere Cube. I didn't want to speak too much to counter Matt's point while he was talking about it, but I, as you could probably tell here, kind of drafted the polar opposite of his deck.
Yeah, here's all the spells that cost more than 3.
Yeah, so I mentioned before that I drafted a vintage cube with a similar approach a few months ago at Cincinnati CubeCon, and that was pretty much just a stock vintage cube list, except at the end of the draft you got Everywheres instead of basic lands. And the lesson that I learned from that draft was that it really doesn't matter. Like you don't need to be drafting like a specific combo or a specific archetype. You just need to be casting better cards than your opponent. So my plan going into the draft of this cube was to essentially look for one of 3 things: either a card that I thought could win the game on its own, cards that let me cast those faster, so ramp spells, and then the burn and the counter spells, the little bit of removal that's mixed in to just help me survive if neither of the first 2 are present. So.
And you say a little bit of removal, but Leyline Binding's obviously broken in Everywhere
Mm-hmm.
Cube. You have a bunch of 2-mana removal spells, I think 4 or 5 in total. Like, you have a lot of really good interaction, so it's not surprising that you're able to get to your top end
Right.
with this deck.
Yeah, and so the draft was a blast. I had a lot of fun playing this deck. Obviously, I mean, I think I sent this deck picture in our thread before it started, and I said that my main goal this draft, regardless of result, would be to copy a Jeskai Revelation with Lutri. I got to do that twice, so that ruled both times. Yeah, I mean, just any number of, and again, kind of the opposite of what Matt's experience was. I think through the 3 rounds of this cube, I think I played maybe 20 minutes total of Magic. It was just, the games were just very, very quick and a bit brutal, if I'm being totally honest. But
What was your overall record? Did you already say?
I didn't, but I did 3-0 with this deck. Yeah, I kind of brutalized some people here, not entirely intentionally. Like I said, I just went in drafting big dumb cards that cost a lot of mana. But you mentioned all the removal. It was really easy for me to just kind of chill until I can cast the Kami War or Nicol Bolas, and kind of just went from there. Helped out a lot that I had like Planar Genesis and Prismari Command, both cards that allow me to ramp a little bit on my opponent's turn as well. So,
Did you get to use Sisei at all to find any of those pieces, or?
I think I activated Sisei once, and it was to put a Teferi in play, and then the game ended shortly after that. But that was a card, I think that was like my 3rd or 4th pick overall, and just never really drew her that much. Like I said, I didn't play a lot of super long games. I mean, I mentioned cards that I think can win the game on their own, and there's Jeskai Revelation, Nicol Bolas, the Kami War, Atraxa. I guess Atraxa doesn't technically win the game on her own, but she effectively does, especially with a deck like this. It didn't take a lot once one or two of those cards hit play for the games to kind of be over.
Were there any standout moments for you that you haven't gotten to go over already in any of the games, not just with these cubes?
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with this one actually because my I think it was the second round with this cube. I was playing against somebody who had drafted pretty much all of your spells cost Wooburg instead of whatever they cost. So he had the Leyline, he had Joda. I think maybe there was a third one. But regardless, he had
the Suns probably.
Maybe, yeah. But he had essentially spent the first few turns of the game. I don't do a lot proactive in the first few turns either. So we were kind of just back and forth. And then he spent his turn 3. I believe he had a ramp spell or something, and he cast the Leyline. That lets all his stuff cost Wooburg. I went to my turn, played Teferi, and bounced it. He played it again. I went to my turn. I played Venser and bounced it. He played it again, and I think I unexpectedly absented on the top of his deck. And then eventually he did get to play his Leyline, and I was unable to do anything about it, which let him hardcast Emrakul to Aeon's Torn. And I had Venser in hand, and I spent way too long thinking about it, given that all bouncing the spell does is just let him do it again while taking extra turns over and over
again somehow?
Do what?
You had Venser in hand again?
Maybe I didn't use Venser to bounce the thing, because I definitely remember I had Venser in my hand when the Emrakul came in.
Okay.
Regardless, so I sat there for a minute, and then I realized that I could just let it resolve, let it happen. He got to take his extra turn. He got to attack me with Emrakul. I was at 20 life. I got to cast Jeskai Revelation, make a bunch of creatures, sack 6 permanents, go to 5, and then very easily just kill him on crackback. So it was, kind of that was the end of that was the last game of that match. It was a pretty brutal. I spent way too much time tanking on what to do about the Emrakul, where if I had just done a little bit of simple math, it was just take it on the chin and move on from there. So yeah, I got to.
It's hard to walk away from the ability to bounce, but I guess bounce doesn't do anything since he gets his extra turn.
Yeah, I mean the only play there really is hoping that maybe I let him take the extra turn, and then maybe before combat he casts something that doesn't let him recast that turn, and I can Venser it. But that's like, I don't know. It feels like what are the odds that he's not just going to untap and just turn Emrakul sideways? Like, what more could you want to do with your turn than that? So, just decided it wasn't worth it, and then realized that the Revelation let me very easily keep a bunch of permanents in play and then do a bunch of damage. So,
well, besides these cubes that we've talked about, there were a bunch of cubes there. Were there any cubes that you regret not having been able to get to?
I wouldn't say that I have a specific one. There's a lot of them that, some that you guys have mentioned already. The Lavender Cube was one that seemed cool once you had talked to me about that a little bit. The Cascade Cube was one that I thought about doing, but a bunch of the crew were way more excited about it than I was, so I kind of just let them have it. We did do our best to not overlap. I think we only had one accidental overlap.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But beyond that, I think I got pretty much what I wanted through this event. The only one right off the top, honestly, I would say is the Chicago Cube, but that's only because I've drafted that cube before and it rules. So
hard to pick a cube that you've done before when a lot of cubes are new fun experiences.
Yeah, exactly. It was on my list all week, and I kept thinking about moving it up, but I was just like, nah, I'm not here to play cubes I've played before or cubes I can play at home. I'm here to play cool new stuff. So
I want to shout out the Control Cube real quick while we're on this topic. That was the cube that this year was my sort of like, this cube looks really fun, but I don't want to play it in the middle of this tournament kind of cube. I just assumed the games would take forever. And I like those games, but I have to play many more rounds after that. And CubeCon can be pretty tiring, just generally. So
that was definitely a lesson learned last year. That like we frequently meet up and draft twice on a Saturday, and it's no big thing but those are cubes that we're familiar with, and we're sleeping on our own beds, and everything that comes along with that. But coming to these events, I mean, it can be taxing.
But it still feels like a ridiculous argument coming from the man who drafted the Sandman cube. So,
well, in his defense, I don't think any of us knew what he was getting into really with that. So,
and that was my third choice that round, so I got bumped down 2 cubes. And yeah, like I thought it might be kind of slow, but I didn't realize what I was signing up for.
Well, regardless, Prose, do you have any closing thoughts on the con overall and our experience there to wrap us up?
I can only echo what pretty much everybody has said up to this point. Go to CubeCon. If you're on the fence, just go to CubeCon.
Even if you're not thinking about going, just go. Now you're thinking about it, so go.
Right. If you are watching this video, you are the correct demographic. Go to CubeCon. That's all I got.
Okay, and that'll be it from us. We will see you with another draft, hopefully within the next few weeks or so, as we get back to our own regularly scheduled drafts soon. TM.